Timothy, I need to pronounce your name. Hey, Mystic Magic Podcast fans, we are in for a treat today because today my guest is Timothy Stuetz. Is it Stuetz? How do I pronounce that, Timothy?
Stutz.
Stutz. It's like it looks.
It's
Today our guest is Timothy Stuetz. Timothy went from being a certified public accountant to an ordained minister to a master of multiple ancient arts and sacred sciences like meditation and Reiki and Tai Chi and yoga and Qigong. And now he's this prolific author of children's books. He's the most prolific children's book author alive today. And so his company is Blissberry Bears Educational, Entertaining, and Inspirational Fairy Tales of the Heart. Wow. There are more original characters than even Disney has created. And so he's also the executive director and founder of Transformations. It's a nonprofit dedicated to assisting people of all ages achieve their maximum personal and professional potential by integrating body, mind, heart, and soul. And he holds people at birth, he holds people at death, and he empowers them in all ways in between. He's developed expertise in human development, in generating and using internal energy to restore health, relax, focus, be successful, and connect with and live their original magic. Welcome, Timothy Stuetz, to Mystic Magic.
Oh, so happy to be with Mystic Magic, Celeste, and you and the audience, and we'll see what kind of mystical magic we can create together.
Right. So, I was looking at your background, and you say that all of your stories and courses are created with God's grace. What do you mean by that?
I mean that over the 40 plus years that I've been meditating and doing all of these different practices,
Mm-hmm.
God's grace and my self-effort has cleared out my mind so that it only thinks when I want it to think and what I want it to think. So it's pretty peaceful up there, and it allows me to listen to the messages of the universe, of God's messages that flow in to me.
Isn't that fun? I know what that's like. So yeah,
Yes.
that's a pretty cool place to be. So, you know, what got you into meditation and Reiki and Tai Chi and yoga and Qigong?
I never went searching for anything. I didn't go searching to write children's stories. I didn't go searching for all these different practices to use myself and to share with others. They just kind of happened at my life, and what started it all was spending 3 days in bed crying and not eating and not drinking, but just laying there crying. And it was in my early 30s, and my life had literally fallen apart. I had done everything that I thought I should do to have a wonderful life. I got great grades in school all the way through college, graduated in the top of my class, got a job with an international CPA firm right out of college, was married, had a child, had a house, and I was living the so-called American dream, and then it all fell apart. And I fell in bed crying and just trying to assimilate everything that was happening. And at the end of the 3 days, I found myself just yelling out to God and saying, my mother taught me how to pray. Now I lay me down to sleep when I was a little child. I've been praying to you every night since. And if you exist, I need to find you. And shortly after I had that
Hmm.
outburst, I felt like getting out of bed for the first time and stood in front of the mirror, and I heard Christ, and I felt Christ behind me saying, I will remake you in my image. And shortly after that, I remembered a friend who I was auditing her company in Hawaii the year before, and when I left, she literally pulled me to the side, whispered in my ear, "If you ever need a place to crash, I've got a couch, and just give me a call." And so at that point in time, I needed a place to get my head together and reassimilate things, and gave her a call, and she had moved and had more than a couch. She had a bedroom for me.
Good.
And when I arrived a couple of weeks later, she gave me this book by Dick Sutphen called Past Lives, Future Loves. And I had never encountered anything like that in my life. And I read it the next day while she was at work and just started crying. And it touched things deep inside me that my daughter had been trying to share with me ever since she was born. And that started my spiritual quest.
Hmm. So you started with meditation?
I started with meditation because shortly after that I was putting together a series of workshops for accountants and lawyers and attorneys and mortgage bankers. And I did a week-long workshop at a university, and put it on all myself, got a few speakers to help out, and towards the last 2 days of that seminar, I had to do so much I didn't sleep for 2 days. So when it was over, the moment I laid down, I literally left my body and knew I was out of my body and could look back and watch it laying in bed and watch the person that was with me start freaking out because she thought I was dead. And I didn't know what I was, but watching her freak out and watching me be a little bit concerned about what was going on, I found myself back in my body, picking up the phone, calling a psychologist I had seen. And she said, "I'll get up and ask Baba what to do." And this is like at 11 o'clock at night. And she called me back in 15 minutes and said, "Baba says to eat something sweet and take it easy." And apparently when you eat sweet things, it calms down the spiritual energies. So I did that, and then got a phone call from her something like at 5 o'clock the next morning, and she asked me if I wanted to go chant and meditate with her. And I asked her what chanting was, and she told me, and I said, "No, I don't sing for anybody. I don't even sing for myself in the shower." And that was a result of some trauma in Glee Club as a child.
Oh, okay.
that I hadn't worked through yet. I hadn't worked through a lot at this point in my life. And so she met me afterwards. I asked her, and she met me for breakfast afterwards, and she brought me a book by Ram Dass and gave me the name of a yoga teacher and gave me the name of an astrologer. And all of that eventually led to a meditation path. So I started meditating.
Okay.
And I was still doing certified public accountant work at the time, and I was real busy. So I allowed myself 2 minutes a day to meditate. And I set a little kitchen timer to make sure I didn't go over. And then I had such powerful experiences meditating and felt so much calmer and peaceful that I took it up to 5 minutes a day, and then 10 minutes a day, then 20 minutes, then 30 minutes, then 30 minutes twice a day, and eventually an hour once a day, and at various times since then up to 4 hours a day.
Okay. So then you started expanding your practice, I take it, when you got into the other aspects that were more in your body?
Well, after a couple of years of meditation, I found my body getting really sick, and doctors and tests couldn't reveal anything that was wrong. And I knew I needed some sort of body work. And I tried to get a massage because that's all I heard of. That's all I knew of. I hadn't even had a massage at that point in my life in my early 30s. But I figured massage might help things. And and massage therapists lost their appointment books. They didn't call me back. There was like a conspiracy going on that Timothy was not going to get a massage. In fact, one man, I finally got an appointment. I arrived at his house 10 minutes early, sat in my car waiting for the appropriate time, and watched somebody else walk up to his door ahead of me. And then when I decided to knock on the door, he said, "Oh my God, I booked two people at the same time. And since she arrived before you, I can't do you."
Mm.
And it was a blessing because a friend of mine who I had breakfast with every week, along with a few other fellas, told me that his wife had taken a Reiki class over the weekend. And his wife happened to be my yoga teacher. So I called her up and said, "What is this Reiki?" And she kind of told me, and she said she needed somebody to practice on. And I said, "Good, because I need something." And so she gave me 4 Reiki treatments in a week that allowed me to see the emotional blockage and the mental blockage that I had created that was creating the physical problems.
Mm-hmm.
And my first treatment was so beautiful. I felt more peaceful than I ever felt in meditation. I felt more connected with God than I ever felt in meditation. And the first words out of my mouth when she got finished was, "I want to die like this. This is just so beautiful." So I think God really heard me when I was saying that, and has allowed me to be with a dozen or so people as they've transitioned, and giving them the blessing of being connected with God as they left their body.
So, do you consider yourself to be a death doula too?
No, I've never considered myself to be anything. Somehow, it's I it's been with students of mine and their relatives. It's been with my relatives, and each experience has opened my eyes to new learnings and new dimensions and new ways of looking at life.
Right. So, I noticed that you have this nonprofit. What made you get into establishing a nonprofit?
I knew I was going into this was in 1986 when I established that. So it was 4 to 5 years after I started meditating. And then I had learned Reiki and became a Reiki master. And I was also teaching yoga at the time. So I wanted a way of providing these services and these benefits to people in a nonprofit way where I could take the funds and use them to create other projects in the world that helped people.
Okay. And so you just kept mastering these different modalities, I guess, the qigong and the tai chi and reiki and all of that.
Yeah, it's like one thing led to another. The meditation led to Reiki, and then I got a real clear message one time that I should learn Tai Chi. And I did not pay attention to that message. I let it go. And then I was at a retreat in Upper New York, and after a few days of being there, my legs blew up from my knees down to the tips of my toes, and I could barely walk. I was swollen.
Mm.
And that taught me a lot about patience. It taught me a lot about moving, because I'd never had problems moving before in my life. And I didn't know what it was, had no idea. But as soon as I got home, I picked up the phone, picked up a magazine from a local health food store and looked for Tai Chi teachers, and found a Tai Chi teacher and started taking a Tai Chi class. And I had such profound effects with the form of Tai Chi I was taking, which is called Tai Chi Cha, which is real easy for Westerners to learn, that I decided I wanted to teach that also, because I felt it was a perfect blend with yoga and Reiki and meditation.
Okay. I'm gonna pause here for a moment, and I want to ask you a question. Do you have a lot of do you have a lot of screens open right now
I hold
on
on
your
a minute.
computer?
Let me check.
Okay.
There, can I
Be,
close out the one I got on with Riverside? Oh wait, here.
no,
Safari's
yeah,
open.
keep Riverside
Okay.
open.
All right.
Yeah. Be,
Everything else, I had one open. Everything's closed now.
okay, because every once in a while there's a thing that where you kind of boring out. So I just want to make sure because that's another sensitivity that Riverside has. Okay,
Okay.
so
I haven't noticed it at this end.
okay, okay. So let me continue with the questioning then. Now I noticed that you went from kind of a cerebral existence into one that is like totally, mystical and relaxed and, open to energy, and obviously you learn through Tai Chi more about obedience to the spirit, right? So what what do you attribute this to? Was it gradual, or was it just something that you just got propelled into?
Well, it was a gradual acceptance of
Mm-hmm.
everything I was learning. In fact, I used to tell people if I had known what I was going to have to give up in my life on all levels, spirit, materially, emotionally, mentally, job wise, when I started on this path, I would have said, no, I'm not doing this. Because I had no experience of what living like this would be like, but I did have an experience of what life was already like. And, for everybody, I think it's real hard to give up what we're used to, even if it's uncomfortable. And many times we don't even know how uncomfortable it is. But I actually,
Right.
when I look back on my life, I feel it's been a reawakening because when I was about 4.5, I started school at 4.5 years old at military school. And I sang in the choir, and we had Bible class every Friday. And I loved singing Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. I loved singing Yes, Jesus Loves Me. And I actually saw angels. I saw chariots whenever I would sing that. And I made the mistake of sharing that with some of my school buddies out in the playground one day. And I didn't get the reception that I thought I would get. And that literally, I knew I was no longer safe to share the innermost aspects of my being, and not having anybody to talk to about that, I just shut down. And I know the moment I decided to shut down. And what really started the
Right. Okay.
reawakening was the birth of my daughter. And even before she was born, when we were choosing names, we chose the first name Melanie because we both liked it, thought it was a beautiful name. And then I got out a book to look up what Melanie means. And the root of Melanie is melancholy. And as soon as I saw that, something inside of me said, no daughter of mine is going to carry the name darkness without having light after it. So
Mm-hmm.
chose the middle name Dawn. And,
Mm.
later learned, many years later, that the word guru, gu is darkness and ru is light. And from that moment, Melanie has been my little guru ever since. When she was born and they separated her from her mom, this is long before I got into any spirituality. Um, when they separated her, she was glowing. This reddish, orange, golden energy was just pouring out of her body and rising up through the air and out the ceiling. And I was watching this and just said to myself, something more profound than the birth of my daughter is taking place.
Mm.
So that was something that I felt like I went through an initiation. I had no idea what I was going through. And when she was about 1.5, I had a pain in my back that had been persistent for a long time. And she walked by me on the upper floor of the house and literally put a finger right in the spot where it was most painful. And the pain disappeared and never came back.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's like, how did you do that? And then when she was about 2.5, she was in the back seat of the car and we were going somewhere. And she started to describe where we were going. And I thought, this is not possible because she's never been there. So I literally just started turning the memory banks back, and trying to find a moment where she might have been there. And it was when she was in the womb. So that got me contemplating, when do we actually become aware? Because she could describe perfectly where we were going, and she had not been there except in the womb.
Wow.
So all of those things kind of started to prepare me for that awakening when I left my body. And even 9 months before I left my body, I took some Valium for a minor operation. And when I went to sleep that night, I also took a pain pill, fell asleep. I had this dream of driving a car with a lady passenger up in the mountains and going around a curve, and I'm going around the curve in this dream, and I'm saying I can't control it any longer. The next thing I know, my eyes are wide open, laying in bed. I'm looking up at the ceiling. There's light going from my eyes to the ceiling like it's projecting a movie. And I'm watching them take our bodies away. The car had crashed. And that pretty much freaked me out a little bit. So I went right back to bed. The next night I took another pain pill, woke up after a short dream again, right after going to bed, and I opened my eyes, and coming out the wall across from me was this man in orange stocking cap and orange robes, and he just keeps coming in and out of the wall towards me. And I just said, I'm a certified public accountant. I have no idea what's going on here. But that was the end of the pain pills. And it was 9 months later from that time that I ended up laying in bed crying for the 3 days. And it was that man coming out of the wall, Swami Muktananda, which is eventually the meditation path that I found, Siddha Yoga. So it's like my life has been like this divine choreograph that I didn't set up, and I'm trying to follow the dance steps that have been laid out on the floor in front of me.
Yeah, it sounds like you were kind of getting a forecast that the death of the life that you knew was coming to an end.
Yeah, but I didn't know it was a forecast.
Right. Well, hopefully you still have a relationship with Melanie. Right, Melanie Dawn.
Boy, that's a conversation for maybe another time. She was actually at age 10 or 11, she swerved her bicycle out in front of a car that was going 40 miles an hour. And like many things in my life that are blessed, it just so happened that the police helicopter was flying overhead at the time and witnessed the accident. The head of the Church of Religious Science in Huntington Beach was driving in her car and witnessed the accident, so she started a prayer circle going immediately, and the police were able to get attention to her immediately. And so she's alive, she's healthy, she's had lots of after effects from the accident. It transformed her life. It again transformed my life in ways that I never expected. Spent every night in the hospital with her for 2 months. They did 7 hours of surgery and didn't give her much of a chance of surviving. And even that morning when I got up, I wasn't able to do anything all day long. My whole body was drained of energy. From the moment I got out of bed, I had to go right back to bed. I stayed in bed all day feeling totally drained, not knowing she'd been in an accident, and only got out of bed because I had a meeting with some friends. And I went to the meeting, left early because I didn't feel right, took myself out to dinner, and I never took myself out to dinner in my life when I was home in town. And when I drove up in the driveway that night about 7 o'clock, my mom came running out of the house and said, "Your daughter's been in a car accident, get to the hospital." And when I got there, it was the first time that we were allowed to see her. They had just finished the surgery and everything. And again, that whole process, maybe about 3 days of her being in a coma, I was walking around the block just taking a rest from it all. And as I'm walking around the block of my house, there's a little girl coming towards me. And all of a sudden I hear my daughter's voice calling throughout the airwaves, calling throughout the universe, saying, "Look, Daddy, I'm this little girl coming towards you. Look, Daddy, I'm the trees. Look, Daddy, I'm the sky." And at that moment, I knew I had to expand my perspective in order to relate to my daughter where she was coming from. So yeah, that whole process, everything's divinely guided. So it was amazing for me and amazing for her, and have had very little contact with her ever since then, because her mom, I was divorced from her mom at the time, and her mom used that as an excuse to keep her from me.
Wow.
So it's one thing to almost lose your daughter through an accident, and it's another thing to lose her through something like that. So yeah, it's all divinely orchestrated, and it's caused me to purge the depths of my being to understand it all and to be with it.
Wow. So how did you go from all of this? I mean, it's a lot of wonderful breakthroughs, a wonderful acceptance period, a wonderful discovery series of moving through spiritual practices and insights. What brought you to children's books?
It was in the process where I actually owned a chocolate shop and was making specialty chocolates, which I did literally because I woke up one morning and the first thing out of my mouth, without even thinking, was I told my partner, if Hershey's can make chocolate kisses, I can make chocolate French kisses. And so I, excuse me, I had a pair of chocolate lips with the tongue curled out designed, and had to end up opening my own chocolate shop for various reasons. But it was in that chocolate shop one day that I received a large box that I did not order. The UPS delivery driver would not take it back because it had my address on it. And I opened up that box and there were 50 little teddy bear faces staring at me. And being a ex-certified public accountant and loving Hardy Boy books and solving mysteries ever since I was a child, I ran down and discovered who should have received those bears. And they were very thankful because the importer that they'd been working with from the foreign country they bought the bears in for their own business tried to sneak that box in for his own use, and somehow it got delivered to me. They gave me the box of bears, and I carried one of those little bears with me in my car riding shotgun, and after about 2 weeks I picked it up one day at a stoplight and said, "Who are you?" And surprisingly, I heard the little bear say, "I'm Poet Bear." And since I wrote love poetry and philosophical poetry and things about life and Mother Nature, I decided to put a little book of my poetry along with quotes of Christ and other inspirational quotes from different people together in a little book, package it with a teddy bear, and sell it. And I got the whole thing together, and my mom took one look at it when the box and the bear were all together, the book and the bear together in a box with hearts around it on my counter to sell, and my mom said, "You blew it. That should have been a children's story, a children's book." And I said, "Yeah, Mom, you haven't read what's in that book yet. There's nothing in there for children or about children, except a few lines of poetry I wrote for somebody at the birth of their child and some experiences I'd had with my daughter." But my mom knew me on levels that nobody else ever has touched into. You know, it's like if I was really feeling down inside but didn't even know it myself, she could see it in my eyes and mention something and get me to tune into it. And apparently her mentioning the children's book, 6 months later, I got the idea for the first story, got the idea for where Poet Bear came from, which is the Great Bear Constellation, who travels to Earth in a blue pearl starship to help children figure out challenges they're having in their life. That was the original impetus. And then when I got that first story done, they just kept coming, one right after the other.
So you just are creative to begin with, and then
apparently so.
And because you've remained open and available to Spirit's divine downloads, you're also following your path.
Yes.
How has writing these children's books changed your life?
Oh my God. They've allowed me to see inner child things that I had held that I didn't know about. They've expanded my creativity. In fact, all of my books, there's a few that are fully illustrated, but most of them just have a beautiful cover story. And it's because I discovered that children creating images in their head when they're young is the foundation for their entire life. So I don't put pictures inside the book because I want children to imagine and feel what's going on within the story on the pages without looking at some set picture that an adult drew.
Okay.
And so not only does it stimulate children, it stimulated me, because about 2 years ago, I was never able to really write children's stories that rhymed. And then all of a sudden, 2 years ago, I sat down to write children's stories, and they started coming out in rhymes. So almost every children's story I've written over the last 2 years, everything's rhymed in them, which just totally amazes me. And every story I've written still amazes me because I get an idea, I sit down, and then it just flows. And a lot of times it's timed with other things in my life. Like I just wrote a story, the idea came 2 weeks ago. And I just sat down and finished it a few days ago. And it happened to correlate a lot with my cousin's recent passing. So it was actually a marvelous process. I was thinking, I hadn't written a children's story in 9 months. I started to feel like it was time. So I have about 10 stories that I've started, and I have the ideas written down for them. So I went through all my stories looking for the one I wanted to do next, or the one that wanted to do me next. And 2 days after that, my original yoga teacher, who also has written a couple of children's books, sends me a private message along with about 6 opening lines of a story, and says, "Now it's your turn. Want to play?" And so we wrote this story together over the past 2 weeks, and it's really been a marvelous experience. And I learned a lot from it, and there's a lot of things in there that all my stories blend fantasy and reality and myth and mystery, proven principles of child development, values, exercises that parents and children can use to increase their breathing, get calm, learn to talk to one another in loving voices, and use nonviolent communication principles.
What kind of an impact are your children's books having on children and their parents?
Not as big as an impact as I want, because I'm now having to learn how to get these things out into the world. I've had a couple of publishers offer me contracts. I've signed a contract with one publisher, and then he published another children's book before mine, and I told him when I read the draft of it that it wasn't for children. Literally, it was some mathematical conglomeration that even a mathematician wouldn't like, let alone a child. And it caused him to go bankrupt. And then I met somebody at a retreat one time that worked with the book division of Unity Church. And we hit it off real well, so he asked me to send a couple of stories. They picked one, they liked it, they wanted to publish it. They had me go through 6 rewrites, and after the 6th rewrite, I get a letter back saying, we can't publish your book because it has a BB gun in it. And it's like, it had a BB gun in the first draft. So then I decided that I was just going to do this myself, and so it's been a long process setting up the foundation to get these out into the world, and now I've created a wonderful book club where children and families can get all of the stories at one time. They get a live monthly reading of the stories with me. The children also get to create their own book based on the story, where they submit their own illustrations for what they imagine happening on the pages, and then I'm going to put together illustrated by children's versions of the different fairy tales that have all different illustrations by children in them. And then that book club also includes 2 live monthly Zooms with parents. So I just provide a space for the parents to get answers to any challenges they have, be in a like community where they can get support, and take them into a peaceful place that they might not get to so easily by themselves.
Okay. Well,
But
I want to know
the children and the educators that have read the books love them. It's just that more children they just need to be out in the eyes and hands of more children. But all the children, all the educators, and all the testimonials I've received are amazing.
Well, I was hoping that you would talk more about what those were, but we're running out of time. Last question, which is the question that I ask everyone who comes on Mystic Magic, and that is, I know you've had a number of them, but what one particular mystical moment have you had that changed your life the most?
I think what's coming from my heart right now is I'm seeing that beautiful light streaming up out of my daughter when she was born, and that just seemed to change everything. I mean, I have had many powerful experiences in meditation, and I've had many powerful experiences with Christ, and if we have time, probably the most powerful experience I had was, again, out of a dream one night. I was in a dream where I was asked to demonstrate a Tai Chi movement to a group of people, and they said, you have 5 minutes to choose which movement you want to do. And so I chose a movement I wanted to do, and then I got out there in front of this crowd, and I found myself doing the least favorite movement that in my practice. And all of a sudden, out of that least favorite movement, I just found myself shooting out the top of my head with Christ and going laughing throughout all of creation. We just laughed and laughed and laughed. And then he
Mm.
took me literally into hell. And I saw things and felt things that I wouldn't wish on anybody. And next thing I know, I find myself laying back and I'm laying back in bed. I'm conscious of my body in bed. I can't move anything. It's like that experience was so powerful, they froze my body so that, and I've read about that afterwards, that if you have powerful experiences in dreams, sometimes your body freezes so you don't hurt yourself or hurt somebody else. And it took me a while to um, move my body again and get in there and move things around. But that was a really powerful experience that shifted things dramatically for me on all levels. I literally saw the total bliss and experienced the total bliss we can live in, and I also saw the torture and problems we can live in, not only afterwards but in this life, if we aren't loving and caring and focused on our path and in our heart.
Yes, that's quite a story. Thank you,
Mm.
Timothy Stuetz, for coming on Mystic Magic. You are certainly a manifestation of what yes looks like, and and how no can really mesh up. But thank you for saying yes to coming on Mystic Magic.
Oh, thank you, Celeste. I've so enjoyed being with you.
This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives.